Thank you, Ligia, and thank you so much to the UXPA team, to all the reviewers here tonight, and for all of you for coming out. As Ligia was saying, it's a really timely time for us to be talking about this topic. As everyone knows, the field of UX is really rapidly growing. There are a ton of positions opening up, but also lots of new professionals entering the field. In my opinion, there's never been a better time for someone who wants to work in UX. But that being said, competition for the best jobs at the top companies is getting extremely fierce. Gone are the days of firing off a link to a half-updated Behance profile or landing an interview just because you can use OmniGraffle. In order to compete, you have to be at the top of your game and evolve your application skills in order to stand out from the crowd. Today, I'd like to give you some tips that will help you land not just any old UX job, but hopefully your UX dream job. First, a bit of background on myself and why I care so much about this topic. As Adam said, I'm originally from Ohio, and as you can see on my Twitter bio, I'm quite a fan of television, curiosity, and cheese. More importantly, my background is in design, which I've been doing for many years. I've worked at many types of companies. I've worked at agencies, enterprise companies, dabbled in a little freelance, and across many different kinds of design. So I started off in branding and marketing, and then got really interested in application design, interaction design, did some iPad apps. And as you know, I'm currently leading the UX team here at AppNexus, and we're growing a lot. Over the past month, my team has gone from 7 people to 9, but I still have 5 more people to hire in the next couple of months. And I'm currently looking for designers and team leads. I just filled my researcher role, but I'm obviously still happy to review any research resumes tonight. And all of this hiring means that I've seen a ton of applications over the past few months, at least 100. It's hard for me to keep count. But I've noticed so many things that I want to share with you tonight so that you can make your own applications that much stronger. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with AppNexus, we are a B2B advertising technology platform. And the way we like to put it very simply is we power the advertising that powers the internet. It's not just our UX team that's growing. AppNexus has hired 93 people in Q1 across our 23 offices, and we're hiring for many more, so obviously keep us in mind, check us out, tell your friends. But if you take one thing away from tonight's presentation, let it be this. Your user is the hiring manager. The most tragic mistake that UX job seekers make is that they fail to design for their audience during the application process. If you're trying to demonstrate that you can put yourself in a user's shoes and create the things that meet their needs and their goals, the first place to showcase that is in the application itself. If not, the hiring manager might not ever make it to your portfolio. So today I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes tour of my process and what I do when I'm reviewing candidates in the hopes that it will give you some new ideas for how to design for your user, the hiring manager. Remember, we're not enemies. We want the exact same thing. You want to land the job, and I want you to be a fit for my needs. I don't want to hire a bad fit, and trust me, you do not want to work at a bad fit. I believe hiring is a great privilege and it has a lot of responsibility, and I know that the decisions that I make will have impact not only on AppNexus, but on the lives of the candidates, possibly for years to come. But it can be really difficult as a UX person. As you all know, we're empathetic to our core. We feel the feels, and we want our candidates to have a great candidate experience. We like them as people. We wish them success. And ultimately, I have to make sure that I'm hiring for the skills that are needed by my teams, because otherwise I'm setting us up for failure and you as well, which isn't fair to either of us. So let's take a look at some workflows that both you and your future hiring manager will have to go through in order to get you on their team. You're all very familiar with the steps that you need to take as a candidate. You prepare, you apply, you get your materials together, search for jobs, apply, and if that goes well, you get an interview. And if the interview process goes well, you should get an offer, which you hopefully accept, and then start onboarding. And just as an FYI, I'm going to gloss through some of the finer bullet points in this deck because this deck will be made available to you, so you can look back at it in more detail if you like. But keep in mind that on the other side, the hiring manager is going through a similar process. They start preparing to hire by getting approval to open the rec. They prepare for screening and hiring. They start searching for candidates on their website and elsewhere. And then they do some screening. They look at every application that comes in. In our case, we do phone screens, and we also do design and research challenges. And if all that looks good, we move on to an interview, hopefully extend an offer, and then onboard a candidate. But tonight's focus will be on the applying and screening step. I'd like to draw your attention to the arrows here. If you look at interviewing, from that step on, every single step is highly collaborative. You're getting a lot of face time with the hiring manager. It's a very personal experience. But in the hiring and applying, in the applying and screening section, it's almost a one-way street. You don't get the opportunity or the benefit of that collaboration, which is why we're going to focus on that tonight. If you're the best interviewer in the world, it won't matter if you don't get past the application screen. Tonight's a really great opportunity to take advantage of the reviewers here tonight and get honest feedback on your materials and how they may be helping you or hurting you. I would like you to think tonight about this resume speed dating as almost a mini usability test. So let's look a little bit closer at the day-to-day world of a hiring manager. Now, I'm not going to call this a persona because it's only based on me and it's not an aggregate as it should be, so I'm calling it a snapshot. But one thing you'll notice here is that I'm very busy and distracted. Now, that's not because I'm just super important and can't be bothered, but it's because hiring is a catch-22. The whole reason a team is often needing to hire is because the team is resource constrained and has more work than they can handle themselves. And hiring itself is extremely time-intensive and resource-heavy, so I'm double busy. There's also just a lot going on. I'm looking at many candidates across multiple roles. I'm using a ton of tools to get these things done, and I'm coordinating across many other people who are involved in the process and stakeholders in the hiring. If I could summarize my pain points in the screening process, these would be my top 5. Number 1, I can't get a complete picture of the candidate. Number 2, I can't get a clear picture of the candidate. Number 3, the candidate doesn't understand or doesn't seem to understand the role or the company. Number 4, the application package submitted doesn't relate to the role. And number 5, the candidate shows their deliverables but not their process or results. I'm now going to go into each of these into greater detail to hopefully give you ideas for how you can improve your own application and avoid causing these pain points. So the earliest problem you can get tripped up on is not including what's asked of you. Look at the job posting carefully and make sure you're submitting everything that's asked for. This is a huge issue because it's fundamental to the rest of the entire process. In this stage, as a hiring manager, my baseline question is, who is this person and why do they want to work here? If I can't answer that immediately, your application is already at a huge disadvantage. The most common issue is a really simple one, not including a cover letter. As many of you may know, JobVite is a really common application software that many companies use. And this is a little behind-the-scenes peek at the first thing I see in JobVite when I look at an application with no cover letter. Nothing. Not a great first impression. So please don't apply without cover letters. It doesn't have to be your grandmother's 5-paragraph business letter. Short and sweet is completely fine, but I need something that tells me, 1, who you are, and 2, why you want to work here. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that you're taking what I call the shotgun approach, which is firing as many applications out into the world as possible and hoping one of them hits. I'm here today to encourage you to take the rifle approach. A rifle is precise, calculated, targeted. In the shotgun approach, sure, you'll get more resumes out into the world, but your success rate will be lower because the hiring manager won't have context for you and how you fit into their role. And here's the kicker, even if you're successful and get a callback, you're not going to be prepared for the interview, and at the end of the day, you might even not really care about the role that you applied for. So the rifle approach is my recommendation because even though it will take you longer to craft an application, your chances of moving forward will drastically improve, and even better, it will be for jobs that you actually care about and are a fit for. Every UX application needs to have 3 critical pieces. A cover letter, which tells me who you are and what you want. A resume, which shows me your work experience. And a portfolio, showing me your skills and processes. Include all 3, every single application. You would be shocked how many applicants apply while missing a very critical piece of this puzzle. If you include all of this information and you align it with the role description, your chances of getting to the next step are extremely high. Do we have any researchers in the room tonight? Yeah, quite a few. Okay, well listen up because this part is especially for you. Many of you were probably tuning out on that last slide when I was talking about portfolios because you think it doesn't apply to you. Well, I'm here to tell you that it actually does. Portfolios aren't just for designers or for artists. I think everybody should have a portfolio. I think salespeople should have them. I think business leaders should have them. And I'll tell you why. Because portfolios aren't specific to a kind of work. Portfolios are simply a vehicle for showing case studies of the projects that you've done and why they mattered. Research projects can be every bit as compelling as design projects, and by putting them in a portfolio format, you can tell a much more powerful story about yourself as a candidate, and it hopefully will be a story that gets you into an interview. Also, I've noticed a lot of researchers more and more are applying with them. So if you have one already, good for you. Keep making it better. And if you don't have one, then you really need to make one because it's going to be really important to stay competitive. So while we're talking about portfolios, let's talk about visual design. As designers and researchers, UX designers and researchers, I know we all care more about functionality and ease of use than visual polish, but we all know that visual design can have a real effect on usability, both real and perceived. So the question that comes up is, who cares if my portfolio doesn't have beautiful design? Well, I don't believe in the year 2015 that there's really any excuse for having a hideous 1999 website. There are so many out-of-the-box tools to help you with this. You can get a WordPress theme, you can sign up for Squarespace, use Bootstrap, whatever. But basically, you don't have to design it yourself from scratch. You just need to know what good design looks like and put it to work on your site. A very common response I get from candidates is that they would love to show me their amazing portfolios, but the work is unfortunately confidential. And to be honest here, at least for me, not including a portfolio is pretty much the kiss of death unless you have a really, really outstanding resume and cover letter. And even if that's the case, I'm just going to reach out to you and ask you to send me your portfolio before we move forward. I've also recently noticed a trend that when I ask applicants for their portfolios, they say, bring me in your office and I'll give you a walkthrough. And I have to admit, that's a pretty clever tactic. I kind of like it because if you're successful, it gets you an informal interview where you actually get to have that connection with the hiring manager. But here's the deal. To put it frankly, I'm not even close to having the time or resources to accommodate that. So it might be a deal breaker for your hiring manager. It's definitely a deal breaker for me. So what do you do if you have sensitive work? First, keep in mind that I'm simply using this to assess your UX skill. Any ethical hiring manager should spend a few minutes looking at it, make their assessment, and move on with their life. I'm not downloading copies, I'm not tweeting about it, I'm not selling it to your competitors, but obviously you should keep any legal covenants that you have with your employers. My first piece of advice would be to try to restrict access. So put a password on it. There are lots of tools out here, WordPress plugins and more that will help you do this. And then when you're done with the application process, change my password or revoke my access. If you don't want to host a website or put it on the web, come up with a really nice PDF and attach it with your resume and portfolio, or with your resume and cover letter. You can also consider generalizing anything that's sensitive. So if you have a sensitive client name, like say McDonald's is your client, change it to a global fast food franchise. Or if you're wanting to show stats, you can convert stats to percentages so you're not giving away any sensitive hard numbers. And if none of the above is a viable option for you, you may need to spend some time on the weekends or on the side doing whatever side projects you can to show your skills in a tangible way that can be assessed by a hiring manager. When you're just getting into the field, it can be really discouraging because it's the chicken and the egg. You need to work to get experience, but you have to have experience to be hired to work. So what can you do? I think it's fantastic and completely fine to do hypothetical or educational projects as long as you're being crystal clear and transparent about what you're doing. Take a product that you use every day or something that you're interested in and find a way to make it better. Just because it's a pretend project doesn't mean that the issues or the users aren't real. But if you do this educational style project, relate it to the real world. Find real users, do real testing. You can also put your skills to good by volunteering for causes that you support. So in summary, always include a resume, cover letter, and link to your portfolio every single time. The reverse of the last pain point is information overload. It's less common, but still worth noting. For example, I see UX cover letters that start telling me their entire life story from the beginning. They say, I've been a designer since the moment I picked up my first crayon at the age of 3. I'm not kidding. I've seen the crayon reference multiple times with multiple people. It's very popular. This information is not unique. And the main issue with it is that I have to trudge through several paragraphs of information to get to who you are and why you want to work here. And quite frankly, I'm human, and at the end of the day, if you're the last deck in my resume, my patience may be running a little low for that kind of detail. Another note on resumes, I sometimes see, especially more junior candidates, showing positions all the way back to when they were doing after-school jobs in high school. If you're applying for an internship or an entry-level role, it might be appropriate to showcase it, but only if you can relate it to the UX position in some way. Otherwise, I would recommend leaving it off or just giving it a one-liner under additional work experience. And the reason I say that is that otherwise it can muddy your story and make your intentions less clear. The most underutilized tool is formatting and hierarchy. Do you know what I love? I love a bullet point. It gets me really excited. I love bullet points. If your cover letter is just a couple of sentences and 3 to 5 bullet points, I will be a happy camper. And more importantly, I'm going to read every single word of what you have to say because I know that you chose those words carefully. And while we're speaking about formatting, it's a good idea to just go ahead and make a plain text readable version of your resume. In UX, obviously, a lot of us have beautiful resumes that were designed in design programs, but that's wonderful, except that in JobBite, the default that I see is the one that JobBite scrapes from the text. And so it may be fine, it may be not fine. So I would recommend just having a plain text copy ready just to copy and paste in there to make sure your reviewer can actually read your materials easily. And lastly, if your cover letter, resume, and portfolio are all super dry, you won't be memorable. The hiring manager won't have a sense of if you're someone that they would want to work with or someone that their team would work well with. My advice is to show your unique personality, skills, and interests. I know it seems really silly, but when I told you a little bit about myself earlier, that I said that I like curiosity and cheese and television, I hope that helped you a little bit see me as a person and someone you might relate to or someone you might remember. And when you're putting together your portfolio, think about how you can show that little bit about yourself to the hiring manager. And that way they'll see you as a unique individual person instead of just an application in JobBite. So in retrospect, edit yourself, get your top points across, use formatting, and bring a little bit of passion or personality to the table. The third pain point is when a candidate doesn't understand, or at least doesn't seem to understand, the role or the company. As the old saying goes, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt. But hopefully by this point I've convinced you that you should not remain silent. You should instead be showing your personality and attaching a cover letter. But if you include a cover letter that is in conflict with the role or what was being asked, you're opening yourself up to look ill-prepared at best. For example, I've received cover letters that say, "I'm a huge fan of the extremely beautiful and breathtaking work that your team is doing." Well, that's flattering, but first of all, work is very generic. I'm not sure exactly which work you're referencing, but more importantly, we're B2B software. So unless this applicant was currently employed in the ad tech industry, it's highly unlikely that they've ever had the opportunity to see or use my products. So these people aren't doing their homework, which is a big flag. My advice here to you would be to pick something very specific about the company that you honestly like and reference that. And it doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world. You could say, "I really enjoyed your blog post about your research process," or "I can't wait to work in a B2B environment where I can stay with a product continuously over time." Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but something that shows, I know what your company does, and I want to do that too. And remember, on the other end of your application is a person just like me. Speak to the hiring manager as a person. Obviously, use your manners, be polite, don't be offensive, but you don't need to be overly formal. You can write in a voice similar to your speaking voice. If you wouldn't walk up to someone in person and say, "Dear sir" or "Madam," why include that in your cover letter? You shouldn't change who you are to suit the company, but you should also at least be aware of what the company culture is. At AppNexus, if you take a look at our career site, you see people wearing orange sneakers and playing video games, so it's probably a good hint that you can tone down the formality a little bit. So in summary, tailor your cover letter to the job posting and just get a sense of what's going on with the company so you have a sense of voice and tone and you can speak to the hiring manager as a person. Number 4, the application package does not match the role. So the longer I spend vetting a candidate, the more specific I get. By the time we're done with a round of in-person interviews, I'm judging things like how well do they fit with our team or can they convey confidence to our stakeholders. But during this very first look in the screening process, I'm really just checking to look that they meet the minimum requirements for the role. I want to see potential. So here's a real-world scenario. I get an application, resume looks good, portfolio looks good, but according to the application, the candidate's in San Francisco and my opening's in New York. If this person's willing to move or are already in New York, that's fantastic, but otherwise, I'm just not sure if they're confused about where the role is or what's going on. Will I follow up with them to clarify? Probably. Could this have been eliminated? Absolutely. Reduce the barriers to entry. Make it as easy as possible for the manager to feel like you're the right candidate for them. Because otherwise, right off the bat, I'm scribbling down and taking notes on all of my concerns instead of getting to focus on your positives. The main contributor to this is I'll get resumes that are outside of what I would have expected to receive for a role with no directly relevant UX experience, as best as I can tell. And that's okay. You know, AppNexus is really open-minded. We have people who have transitioned from other types of work and entry-level roles. But if my posting's for a UX researcher and you send me a resume full of JavaScript engineering, I just don't know what to make of that. So when I get applications like that, I'm pretty much assuming you're taking the shotgun approach and I likely decline. Also, as you probably noticed, job titles aren't very standard in UX. I've seen designers who are product analysts. I've seen researchers who are analytics managers. So if your title's unclear, clarify it and just be sensitive to jargon that you may be using that might be native to your own industry or company. So if your resume is not typical, make sure you clarify why. And this last one is huge. Candidates showing deliverables, but not the process that got them there and the results that they achieved. I cannot overstate how common this is. If you focus on this, you will stand out from the pack in a really good way. Let's dive into some common elements of the portfolio. The first is what I call the wall of wireframe syndrome. Just because you can make boxes or arrows in a design tool or draft a survey doesn't necessarily make you an effective UX professional. Tools are simply a precursor to skills. Don't focus on the tools or even the deliverables, really. Deliverables are just a means to an end. You can create something to impact the user, so focus on the process and the impact, not the tools that you use to get there. And logoitis is just as bad. A wall of logos without context for what the project was or what your role entailed is not helpful. I might see a company name that I recognize, but for all I know, you designed their email signature, so be sure to clarify that. Often, portfolios are showing multiple facets of skills, and it's helpful sometimes to organize those into groups if you want to categorize design, research, whatever. But sometimes I'll see a portfolio and it looks like the type of work the candidate is passionate about is not necessarily aligned with the role. So for example, I'll go to a portfolio and the categories will be poetry, illustration, and UX. Or I'll come to a website and the first thing it says is, "Hi, I'm Joe and I love character animation." Well-rounded is great, I love it, but just make sure the emphasis is on what you're trying to showcase. How many of you here tonight have been exposed to the concept of behavioral-based interviewing? Anybody? You? Okay. So for those who aren't as familiar, behavioral-based interviewing is a popular technique that focuses on asking for examples of your past and digging into them to learn more about you. Past performance is one of the strongest indicators of future behavior. At AppNexus, we have parts of our interview process that are designed to be hands-on, where you can show us what you can do. But it's also important for us to dig into what you've done in the past. So, for example, rather than asking, "How would you solve a conflict?" a behavioral-based interviewer would likely ask you, "Tell me about a time when you experienced conflict within your team." You can see how the second prompt would be a lot less hypothetical and more concrete, which is compelling. That's exactly what you want. You can use that same technique, apply it to your portfolio. Tell the reader a story and take them on a journey. Interviewers and candidates who are trained in behavioral-based interviewing often refer to the acronym STAR: Situation, Task, Action, and Result. Every example or story should give the full STAR. In your portfolio, rather than just slapping up an image of a website you designed, tell the STAR. But the STAR model is great, really widely used, but I think UX can do even better. Now, my acronym is not nearly as good, but I propose to you the STOR, which is Situation, Task, User, Iteration, and Result. So S and T are the same, but instead of just focusing on action, I recommend bringing the user into the story. What did you learn from the users? How did they push you and teach you? Share your results, but also include iteration. Design's a continuous learning process. You can apply the STOR to both your portfolio and your interviewing in order to tell a more compelling story. And lastly, don't be afraid to share challenges and failures. The whole philosophy of design thinking is built on iteration and continuous improvement. Consider usability tests. We don't do usability tests just to pat ourselves on the back. Instead, we're digging in and we're looking for non-confirmatory data. Where did we fail and how can we improve? So don't hide project failures or challenges on your portfolio. Highlight them. Show us your rigorous thinking and that you're comfortable with always learning and striving to improve. So ensure your portfolio matches the role and tell the full story. The important thing to remember tonight is that you have more power over the screening process than you probably think. You can take concrete steps to avoid or minimize pain points and remove barriers that may keep hiring managers from seeing you as their ideal candidate. You can avoid the top 5 pain points by providing a complete picture of yourself, providing a clear picture of your goals and processes, ensuring that you understand the role in the company, relating your application to the role, and telling the full story about your process and results rather than simply showing deliverables. In summary, you can put your UX skills to use by designing for your user, the hiring manager. Thank you. So I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but I think we can take a couple questions. Is anybody keeping time? No? All right. All right, let's start right there with you.
I have a question. I've been freelancing, so it's basically you're getting in the project, maybe in the middle, or they ask you to do certain things, and how you can present your work in your portfolio. Like you don't know what research was done before, or maybe they just mentioned, but you don't have any files to present and put in your portfolio. Like you might have, say, wireframes, and after that, you don't know what's happened to the project because your freelance project ended.
Yeah.
Like how to present, you know, stuff like this.
Sure. Obviously, having to miss parts of the process isn't ideal from a UX standpoint, but that's a real world thing that happens to all of us, right? I think no matter if you're a freelancer, if you're working in an enterprise company, all of us are working to be more strategic and to own more of the whole design process, right? So in your case, obviously, you want to be sensitive to your clients, so maybe you password protect it. But as a hiring manager, I wouldn't look down on the fact that there were certain parts of the process you weren't able to be a part of. The main thing is, were you aware that that happened? Like, are you aware that you would have liked to have had research before going in? Notate that when you're telling the story. Notate that and say, this is the point that I came into the project. Here were the things that were already decided. Sometimes you can share like what you may have recommended versus what was implemented, but I think telling a real-world story is completely fine. Sure. One more question, and then we'll get to the resume speed dating.
Hi there.
Hi.
Can you address the post-interview process, specifically thank you notes, and as a hiring manager, do they affect your decision-making process, how quick you get them, how personalized they are? You know, what can a candidate do post-interview to kind of help seal the deal with you?
Sure, great question. So to be frank, I've pretty much always gotten a thank you note from almost every candidate we've had to an in-person interview. Part of that may be that we're just very rigorous on screening up front. We do design challenges, phone screens, so by the time they're here for an in-person interview, they're pretty invested in the process, and so are we. That being said, I don't think that a thank you note has a ton of impact on my decision as a hiring manager. By that point, I'm going off of my team's feedback, my feedback, and just really trying to see, is this person the right fit for the project team they're going into? So I would say the thank you note actually plays a pretty small role in my decision, but culture fit is really important to our team, and we're a very supportive and collaborative team. So it's appreciated, but I wouldn't say that I wouldn't pass on a candidate I would otherwise have hired if I didn't get my thank you note. And also, I'm usually making hiring decisions within a day or two. Like typically, I'm getting feedback that day if possible from the reviewers, and maybe the next day at the latest. So usually, I know unless we are interviewing multiple candidates in 1 week, I usually know what I'm going to do within a day or two, so by the time the thank you note comes in, we've kind of made up our minds. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your questions. I know we ran out of time, but I'm obviously sticking around. If you have more questions, please come find me. And at this point, I'd like to bring back Akiko, who's going to give us the overview of how the speed dating portion of tonight will work. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.